We're joined by Horacio Falcao. In your new book, Value Negotiation, you talk in the last chapter about ethics, and you say that ethics is a source of value. What do you mean by that?
Many people talk about ethics and they say ethics, values, they put those in one sentence. What I also wanted to add to that perception or definition of ethics was an idea that ethic is also a source of value in the sense that if I behave ethically, I feel better about myself. And that also then should help people better measure the role of ethics in their negotiation, because when they see a conflict between an economic interest, which is more directly related to the concept of value, and a moral interest or ethical interest, which is usually just attributed to something more psychological or fuzzy or something more subjective. And therefore, many times people in a hard situation at work, when there's a lot at stake, they might start choosing the economic interest as a prevailing or a necessity or an emergency over the other. What I'm trying to then bring forward here is that a deal that is closed ethically has more value to all of those involved, including not just the parties, but the companies or the organizations and society as a whole. And therefore, ethics has value.
When you go into negotiations, you're not likely to be upfront about everything. You'll probably withhold some information. Isn't it then that we're in a sort of fuzzy grey area here?
It could be. What we try to recommend is a value negotiation approach to it, is that you should promote saying the truth and yet manage the information disclosure in a productive way. What does that mean? It means that eventually you will try to reveal all the truth that is helpful for the negotiation and more. That eventually you will try to bring them to also reveal the truth about them. That you will not lie because you don't want to lie, but you will actually reveal information in a careful way, meaning you eventually will reveal everything that is needed, but in a careful way enough to guarantee that they are also reciprocating, so that you don't expose yourself more than you have before needed. And if that makes sense, then is the idea that if I'll put some truths on the table and you put some truths on the table. Now you ask me, Horacio, so what's your bottom line? And I'll say, well, help me understand how that's helpful for the negotiation. I'll be glad to share my bottom line if this is going to help both of us be better off. But if that's going to just create a situation where you're going to be now able to take more advantage of me, I will feel that this is not the kind of information I like to say. You see, I'm not lying, but I'm also protecting myself by saying the truth about the situation, but not the truth about the bottom line. And also still sharing with you my willingness to talk about the bottom line, insofar as either you share as well, or you tell me how this is going to help us be better. It's a completely different approach to manage the truth-telling, but it's still truthful without being naive.
You were talking about the need for courage, but it could be that when you're in negotiations, you just make a mistake and you don't have the ability to rectify it.
If someone does something that is ethically wrong, let's put it as a overarching topic, ethically wrong, but it was because they were unethical, basically you're now down a very dangerous slippery slope, because hey, if I'm unethical, then I might as well just take that road and go for it. However, if you acknowledge that there was just an ethical mistake, there's a lot more hope of going back into the right track, either by overcoming that mistake with a second move, or by working harder next time to avoid that mistake, and by understanding that we're just humans and therefore imperfect. Which doesn't mean that we don't strive for perfection, ethically speaking, but it does mean that we also accept some of our imperfections and still work on them to improve.
At the end of the book, you say, sometimes we have to walk away from a deal to protect our ethics. We do not have to close a deal that sacrifices such important interests as self-respect and self-identity. Sounds rather idealistic, but is this something that you really hope people will take heed of?
I hope they do, and I hope they understand that the more prepared and the more skillful in value negotiation they are, the more of these ethical tensions they will be able to manage during a negotiation before they have to make the choice of walking away. And if I'm skillful and good enough in value negotiation, hopefully I'll be able to do that more often than not, thus limiting the amount of negotiations where I'll really walk away to a very, very few, a minimal, 1%, maybe less, where I can also then afford to do that also from the economic perspective. Because of course, if every other negotiation I have to walk away to protect my ethics, is because I'm not knowing how to negotiate them well enough. So I do hope that people will take that to heart. I do hope that people will remember that at times the solution is, this is not working. And no matter what choice I make here, no matter how skillful I am to manage this, I will eventually be making an ethical mistake or even being unethical, which are two different things, by the way.
Horacio Falcao, INSEAD professor and author of a new textbook called Value Negotiation. Thanks for joining us on INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you very much.